came in with that first question, which I
Thank you.
delayed you on, and then I'll go to Councillor Kirkham. So, Councillor German, thank you.
Given the significance of the project, how many questions are you going to let us ask?
One.
Right, okay, thank you. Page 225, the third bidder, potentially, that doesn't answer the power of veto question, and page 223, the 10-year, in terms of funding shortfalls in the airport, they talk about 10 years funding for some or all of the operational losses. Obviously, the deal will be for a much longer time period than 10 years to allow for the capital investment required and the returns to be made. So what level of confidence do Cabinet have, given that they aren't undertaking the red line of power of veto and they aren't undertaking to cover all operational losses for the period, that this does represent a good deal for the taxpayers of Cornwall?
So, Julian, I said one question, but I did let you spread over. I know, I'm not, I'm just, that's a subtle hint to Councillor Kirkham. Okay? So I'm going to go to let's not elaborate, but I did allow Julian to spread himself over, so that's a subtle hint. David.
But fundamentally, Councillor German, you've asked one question, which is how much certainty and longevity do we get on the deal and the financing, etc. We amongst our red lines are keeping the airport open. For the rest of it, and I may well be anticipating a question Councillor Kirkham's going to ask as well, but as I said before, this is now down to having found a preferred partner, negotiating the deal that deals with these points. And they're very good points. And they're points that when we hopefully come back in 3 or 4 months with a draft deal structure and a financing structure will be answered. And as we've said before, the details of that will go through scrutiny. But we cannot sit here today because we've not had those detailed negotiations.
And then I am going to go back and give you another opportunity to ask another question, okay? And Jane, I hope you don't mind, but you will have the same opportunity. Louis, thank you.
Just sort of reiterate what David said, really. Although, I said in open session, this has been an ongoing process. This part of the process, this nitty-gritty, is only just starting now. I absolutely share the concerns which you've echoed there, Julia, and you've said, Jane. It's now about, is the deal the right deal? And I've said from the start, if the deal on the table at the end of this process is not the right deal, then I won't be supporting it. It's about getting the right deal, not any deal. But it's really important that we take the step now of identifying the preferred partner. So we need to get back in the room with them. We need to say, look, this is the concern around the 10 years. This is the concern around, percentages. This is the concern about everything. We need to show it's our absolute duty to get value for the taxpayer and do the right thing for the taxpayer. So I'll just reiterate what David sort of said. Yes, the 10 years is a point of concern. Yes, it is something we're going to thrash out. It may be more, maybe less, I don't know. But with that's what needs to be discussed. The same as the percentages. Now that's the nitty-gritty we need to get into.
Thank you, Chair, for the second question. I do have lots, but I appreciate being able to ask a second one. The airport exclusivity, the exclusivity agreement that is being proposed until the 31st of October 24. In the documentation, we were talking about handover in December 23. So we're now talking about a 4-month window to have the negotiations and conclude the deal. Cabinet colleagues, we've talked about devolution and other items already this morning, are aware of how long things can take in terms of council processes. So what's your level of confidence that a deal can be concluded by 31st of October 24, and what mechanism, if you're there or thereabouts come the 30th of October 2024, you could just make that time period longer, but you're giving yourself a very short time period to conclude the deal. So what's your level of confidence? And if you're nearly there, what mechanisms are you going to use to then be able to continue to have those negotiations?
I'm happy. Councillor Gardner and I have had various meetings with CBRE and our lawyers on this, who are excellent. I am happy that with a lot of hard work, we will get there by 31st of October. If we don't, we're not suddenly going to say to our preferred partner, oh, well, it's no longer exclusive now, we're off to speak to, I don't know, Mr. Putin or something. Of course we're not. Logically, if you get to the 15th... Sorry, hang on. Logically, in a commercial transaction, if you've got an exclusivity agreement, which runs out at a date, and you get 2 or 3 weeks short of that and go, hang on, we're going to overrun by a couple of weeks or whatever, you either what you probably do in real life is you don't even extend the agreement. You just have an exchange of emails to say, can we just confirm we're happy this runs to 30th of November, and that's it.
And this is a formal cabinet decision, and you'll just override it.
But the cabinet decision doesn't, unless somebody correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't say we will have done. It says our aim is to get one done. The cabinet decision is to grant an exclusivity period, but you've got to allow for us to be commercial here.
One of the reasons it's taken us so long to get to the point where we are now, it's taken 2 years, is because of the amount of due diligence which has taken place thus far, particularly from a legal point of view. It has taken months and months and months to unpick everything, to talk through every eventuality, to get to the point where we're at now. So a lot of that hard work that sometimes would be done after this point, in terms of, looking back into complex legal things to do with the land ownership, etc., has been done. That gives me more confidence that a tighter time frame is achievable, and like then you could have put a date on in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, whatever. I'm sure negotiations would fill the time that we allotted to them. But as I've said, at the moment, this is costing the council £4 million a year. That's due to increase. I think the forecast for this year is 4.6. Every week, every month, every year that this goes on, one is costing the council money, but actually, more importantly, is time that we're not doing what we want to do. And that's why we've all agreed to work hard on this and get it done. Over the time that it's already taken.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Kirkham, I'm going to suggest that you have your little expanded time and ask your questions all in one go, if that's acceptable, okay. David and Lou.
Okay. Well, you'll know that this, as I said at the start, the whole thing gives me the willies a little bit, transferring our 650 precious acres into this partnership. Some of the things that they put in their offer, just a couple of things I'll pick out. They want a minimum of 90-10. Please, I know you're talking about vetoes and everything else, but that seems like we retain an incredibly tiny part. So please, can we have some indication on where you'll go on that? And the other thing that I'm confused about is the funding of the losses. They put, I think it's page 25 or something of their letter. They talk about funding the losses with a loan that they give to the partnership, secured by a charge over the airport that then will be paid back. And I don't like the sound of that, because that doesn't sound like they're covering the PSO at all. It sounds like they're giving us a loan and then it's all paid back before anyone sees any profits of anything. So just to confirm the basis that those losses will actually be covered, whether it will be covered by them paying for them or whether it will be covered by a loan. And are we going to let any charges be secured over the airport, the spaceport, any of the property that we own? And the question about freehold ownership. Where's it go?
Thank you, Councillor Kirkham. Councillor Harris.
point of clarity, because you used the term PSO there in the wrong context. So the PSO is the subsidy which we give to the flight to London. That comes from Cornwall Council.
Sorry, I meant the lot.
The subsidy, yeah. It's just really important because the PSO is not part of this.
Councillor Harris.
Good questions as usual. It's very trite to say the whole thing's been negotiated, Jane, so that's it, go away. But we're in part two, so I'll put some flesh on that very, very thin bone. They talk about 90-10. Look back to what I said. We have an absolute duty to get value for what we put in to this partnership. And I'll flip on to your last question about are we transferring freeholds or leaseholds in. Currently, the lawyers are talking very sensibly about transferring in very long leaseholds. And the reason for this, and you're an employment lawyer, not a property lawyer, but I'm sure you know this, is you can build in a lot more power in a lease than you can in a partnership agreement. So that's your last question answered. We're talking long leasehold. In relation to your first bit, we finished? About 90-10. No, because we are going to need to get value for that. So what logically happens, and this is just one construct, is on day one, we put in an asset worth 10. Let's just be stupid here for a minute. In days 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, these guys are putting in the money to develop the airport and fund the losses, and they are their capital contributions. And at that stage, obviously, the partnership interests will move. But like I said, that is just one scenario. That's not a given scenario at all. That is just one scenario of how it will work. But there is the key point here that we have to get best value. There's a specific legal expression that the chief exec will keep me on if I go too far off it. But we have to get best value. So there's no way we're putting in an estate that is worth, I'm not even going to throw a figure out, a lot of money without the best value for it. And in terms of funding the losses, yes, their thing does talk about a shareholder loan. That's all open negotiation. Because as far as I'm concerned, that is part of their capital contribution to the deal.
Just very quickly then, we talk about transparency and going to scrutiny. Will all the specifics of the deal be open at scrutiny to look at and to Cabinet? Will I be able to know if that's been negotiated or not?
I think I've just looked at Councillor Gardner, I've looked at Councillor Taylor, and I'm looking at the Chief Exec, just in case she's going to kick me.
I think, Councillor Harris, one thing that scrutiny have picked up is actually the detail of the deal is going to be important. That's what's important to them, actually, because one deal is very different to another deal. So we've always said we'd be as open with scrutiny as we possibly could, and why couldn't scrutiny see that? I will add, Jane, it's bloody disappointing when we've been working on this for months and months and months and months to read about it on Cornwall Live and to receive emails about it from a member of the public of things that have appeared. I didn't say it was you, but it's come from this council somewhere. And of course, and everyone involved has worked so hard to keep the commerciality of it, and actually, and that's been a real key feature right through this. So yeah, I would be, mega disappointed that if that continued to happen. But that doesn't mean, and I'm not saying for a moment that we wouldn't share full deals with scrutiny, because it's right and it's proper.
Right.
Sorry, I think Councillor Gardner's made the point. But there's no point saying we're going to go to scrutiny unless we put the full deal in front of scrutiny. And I would expect, on that sort of commercial thing, I'd probably be sitting in front of scrutiny, getting kicked and scratched to pieces to explain it. And if I wasn't able to explain it with the benefit with our lawyers, scrutiny should throw it out. So yes, it has to go to scrutiny.
Thank you. Chief Executive.
I just,
in light of it would appear that information that was in Part 2 papers has been leaked into the public domain. I think the intention of Cabinet has been made clearly in Part 2 that they wish for scrutiny to have the opportunity in advance of a Cabinet decision to scrutinise the final nature of the deal. I would like, though, for the monitoring officer to review what has happened and to give advice around how we would go about ensuring that that was the case, so that we protect the integrity of this council and that the actions of this council do not lead to a loss of credibility in our ability to manage effective commercial negotiations. So the form and manner within which that we do that, I think we need to let the monitoring officer give consideration to. But the intention of ensuring that scrutiny can see the nature and details of the deal in order to discharge their function, I think is clear and has been set out by Cabinet as a commitment that will be made. So, for instance, Jane, because you'll be asking what does that mean that I'm saying, is that I have, and we do have a provision in this council for super pink papers, for things to have a different test to it. I think that that's something for the monitoring officer to consider. There is also experience that I've been part of, not necessarily in this authority, but in others, where actually members are given the opportunity to read the deal with an officer present in a room, and not to be sent information in electronic form. So I think that the manner within which that we do that is something that I think we have to give some consideration to in light of what has happened to date. Thank you, Jane. I'd like to give other members opportunity to ask their questions. Councillor Barnes.
On that, it's just to say, because we don't have anyone on that particular scrutiny committee, so I assume that would go wider than the scrutiny committee to the members, because I don't want to be excluded.
All matters, I think, for consideration, but I think that the comments that have been made by Cabinet is that actually that they would want it to be available to members to scrutinise that. Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I haven't seen any of the pink papers beforehand, so all this is new to me. And as much as I trust Councillor Harris and his wisdom, I'm a bit of a cynic. I know you're shocked. But I think relying on councillors who are basically amateurs promoted to public office is perhaps not the best way to review whether this is a good deal or not. And could we have someone who's a professional to review any possible deal and give us a proper judgment? And it's a bit like having a clerk of the works to come in and check that everything is going as it should be. I'm also very concerned about giving over more than 50% to somebody else. Perhaps I'm a little tight by nature, but I always think, you should always hold on to 51% rather than giving away 60%. I'm not sure Councillor Harris can reassure me on that. But this is, as I've said before, this is a decision that's going to affect the whole of Cornwall and affects all the councillors. And I know that the monitoring officer, he's now gripping the seat and probably thinks that this is just a decision for Cabinet. But I think this is of such a magnitude that the final decision should be made by all the members.
Councillor Barnes, I'll just address one of the points you made. We are elected from our residents to do a job, and that trust has been put in our hands. And obviously for us as Cabinet, we do not make decisions lightly. In actual fact, we are heavily supported by our officers, and I want to thank them because, as Councillor Harris has said, this has been a very long process. I always said at the very start that the Cabinet were appointed not on geography, but because of their skills, and everybody has something that they bring to the discussions. But we are guided, and we do seek advice from officers, and where necessary, we go out to professional consultants. So I'm not happy with how you've described us, but I am now going to hand over to Councillor Harris on percentages. Thank you.
Can I come back on this first point as well? Which was a slightly bizarre comment, Councillor Barnes. So I just want to make a point clear, because I'm not quite sure where you were going. Cabinet are not negotiating this deal. That's not our job. It's the job of officers to negotiate. Cabinet obviously have the final decision, and some of us with more experience than others will input during those negotiations. We also have top-class external advisors on board already. I think this was your point. You know, we've already got CBRE, one of the biggest real estate advisory companies, etc., in the world, on board. We've all met with these people. They're cracking. We've got a cracking law firm on board as well. So in terms of our experience, we don't need to pull in an external clerk of works. That was one. Percentage, this again is back to where we get to in negotiations. And as I explained in my answer, I think, to Councillor Kirkham, given we have, quite properly, have to get full value for what we put in, it's pretty simple to see a structure that says on day one, we have 95%. But as the partner puts a pile in, it moves. Now, whether it moves to 51.49 or 49.51, the key is what is in the reserve matters in the partnership agreement, which is what can only be done when both partners agree. And that's where your control comes from. That's where we're in part two, so we're not being screened. That's where you stop yourself getting screwed over.
Councillor Cole.
I'm not going to get to the meat of this item. I just wanted to comment on the wider engagement through scrutiny, and I'd just like to say I welcome greatly what's just been said about making sure that the wider membership can really get to scrutinise this appropriately. I think what you've said is appropriate. In terms of, I think some of us who are not cabinet members, we've had frustrations in this council, for example, on the GLL contract, where we were asked to scrutinise the renegotiation of a deal, but we weren't allowed to see any of the underlying financial data, which frankly made it a bit of a nonsense. So this is a step away from that, which I welcome greatly. And as one of the group leaders outside the administration, I'd be happy, I'm sure Jane and others would be happy to sit down with you guys in terms of working out how you actually get the information out there and control it in an appropriate way. Because I do share your concerns when information gets out there. So that was all I wanted to say. So I just welcome that promise of wider engagement with the full information. Thank you.
Councillor Cole, thank you for those remarks. And one of the things we will continue to do as well is continue to have those group leader meetings on what is a very, very important subject. So what I'd like to do, Louise, because...
Can I just bring up 2 points that I think are really quite important, and they came out in the scrutiny process. And I think they opened the eyes of some of the members of the scrutiny, and I think it's really important that, we said we want as much transparency as possible. So these are questions, there's 2 questions that were asked directly to the managing director of the airport. So I'm just repeating what she said, and please, members of scrutiny, if I get this wrong, please do correct me. So the first part was the suggestion that we could cover the subsidy with the reintroduction of an airport passenger tax. and again, I didn't answer this. This was answered by the MD of the airport. So an airport passenger tax of £10 per head on 440,000 passengers would raise 4.4 million. Yes. However, we know from experience, we know from the last time that we introduced it, and we know from policies that some of our airlines have, and we've got 10 airlines in the airport at the moment, particularly Ryanair. Ryanair have a policy that they do not operate out of airports with an airport passenger tax. Okay? They have said categorically that if we reintroduce that, they will leave and withdraw all operations from Newquay Airport. Put that in perspective, Ryanair are responsible for over 50% of all passenger numbers at the airport. They are responsible for 100% of all international passengers in the winter months. That's what would happen. So yes, you would raise 4.4 million initially. You would see your passengers drop off. Ryanair would pull out. You'd lose all your winter flights. And now, say that that's a threat or whatever. That came from the MD of the airport, and it's Ryanair's policy. And they did it to us before, so we know they would do it again. So you wouldn't raise 4.4. You'd raise a fraction of, and you'd halve the number of passengers. So that's the first thing. That's why airport passenger taxes are not popular. Any airports in the UK, the airlines that are really, really against them. The second part is, and we've talked a lot about the capital investment surrounding building out the Aero Hub and building out commerciality on the wider airport estate. What we haven't touched on is actually the amount of capital investment that the airport itself, the operational airport, requires and will require in the coming years. So all airports in the UK will legally have to be carbon neutral by 2040. That is a requirement. We will have no choice in that matter. Everyone is working towards that. But in order to get there, to make an airport carbon neutral, you need to do some pretty big things. You know, all sorts of things. And it's not just about putting solar panels on the roof. It's about introducing more modern aviation fuels, et cetera, et cetera. That is going to require significant capital investment. At the moment, we cannot get there. So when we talk about the longevity of the airport and wanting an airport that runs past 2040, we're going to need to do something about it. We're going to need to find the money in some way to keep that operational airport going and be a modern carbon neutral airport and meet all the security requirements that we've already talked about. So I just want to throw that in as well, that actually keeping that, getting the investment into the airport itself, not just the wider airport estate, is also a large part of this, because we won't have an airport after 2040 if we don't do something.
Councillor Worth, is it a part two contribution?
Yes, it is in a sense, because I just want to go back to some of the points I made when I was in scrutiny. And in some ways I want to get across to members, and I remember this from my experience in Dragon's Den. And in some ways this is starting to feel a little bit like it, and that we're discussing things publicly and we're going to the wall, and it's about a programme that is being watched for entertainment. Can I stress that when we were in that programme, the biggest thing the BBC were concerned about was the confidentiality of the deal before it was broadcast. It was huge, and it was big. It was a big factor to the business that if you did break that confidentiality, because there was a period of time before the filming and the transmission, that you were in bigger trouble than actually doing the deal in the first place. It was horrendous. So what I can say is that I'm very conscious at this point to restrict the point of going to the wall and having it filmed and having it discussed and put across in public, and how fundamentally that can break the whole deal. So I'll leave that there.
Thank you. Louise, I think it's apt now that we move out of part two and go back into part one of